listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. I'm Cynthia, the pharmacist, and today you'll get your questions answered and your curiosity cured. So today we're going to talk about cholesterol, and I'm going to start really basic because cholesterol is one of those things that can be tricky, but if you read headlines, it can get really scary, and so we're going to start at the basics. So cholesterol, your body makes cholesterol. It's made from the fats that you eat, and probably if you cook, or even if you don't cook, but you have any little bit of memory from basic chemistry that you took in high school, you'll know that fats don't mix with water. Fats fall into that oily category, and where they don't mix with water. The types of fat that you may cook with, you have liquid fat. That's going to be your oils, so it means that they're liquid at room temperature. And then there's your solid fats, and those are the fats that are solid at room temperature. So the fat that your body uses, it uses both types, and the same properties that make it liquid when you cook with it or solid when you cook with it, those properties affect how it works inside your body. So in your body, because so much of your body is made up of water, those fats can be really, really unhappy. So your body has this fun little trick that it will stick a head on fats. Now, fats are usually really long chains of like the same pattern of molecules. So carbons and hydrogens and all of these things. The long chain, it's like the same pattern over and over and over again. But there's not a whole lot of it that can be attracted to water, and thus that's why it doesn't mix well with water. So your body has this trick that says, well, we're going to take this thing that kind of does like water and stick it on the end. So then it looks like this snake with a really big head. So it sticks this head on the tail, and so the head's kind of okay with water. It's like, okay, I'm cool here, but the tail's like, still don't like the water. So that's called a lipoprotein. So here's the water, here's the little head. It's like, okay, I'm okay with water. Here's the tail hates water. So then the body makes these lipoproteins and puts them together. So then when they're all together, all of the little tails that hate the water smush together, and all of the heads that are okay with the water are sticking out. So it forms this little ball. So all of the tails in here are safe from the water, and all the heads that are okay with the water, because it's in your blood's made of water, are cool. So it's like, all right, we're cool. We don't mind being here because we are okay with water. So that's how your body kind of deals with the fats that you eat and like puts them together to be able to transport them around. So your liver is responsible for all of your cholesterol production. And there's all kinds of processes that are pretty complicated that go into cholesterol production. But these lipoproteins are the crux or the building blocks of the cholesterol that your body uses. So the lipoproteins, you've probably heard of LDLs, which are low-density lipoproteins, and HDLs, high-density lipoproteins, and the LDLs are called bad cholesterol, and the HDLs are called good cholesterol. And that's kind of okay, but not really exactly the right thing. So here's another basic chemistry concept. Density refers to the amount of stuff you can cram in a space. So if you have very little stuff spread over a large amount of space, it's going to have low density. But if you have a whole lot of stuff crammed in a really tiny space, that's going to be a higher density. Make sense? We're good with that? Y'all good with that? Okay. Thus, the low density lipoproteins are a larger space and the stuff's not as tightly packed in there together. But then the high density lipoproteins means that there's more stuff crammed into a tighter package. So the other thing about the HDLs and the LDLs is the body will put other proteins with it to help drive it around and like tell it where to go. So the HDLs end up with more proteins, and so they get better direction and better focus in saying, I have one place to go. My end target is the liver, so that's where I'm headed. Where the LDLs have less proteins added to them, so then they are more easily distracted. The egg controversy, they raise and lower cholesterol. Okay, so let's think about an egg. If the egg didn't get picked and sent to your grocery store for you to buy and eat, what would happen to it? It would grow and turn into a baby chicken, right? So when you think about the things that are needed for that baby chicken to grow inside that egg, if we didn't interrupt the process and eat it, there is the part of the egg that's actually going to develop and multiply and build the baby chicken. And then there's going to be the part of the egg that is feeding that process and providing energy. Because eggs, unlike a human baby that just gets a constant supply of energy because it's connected to mommy, that egg has to contain every single ounce of energy and nutrient and supply building blocks to build that baby chicken. So when we stop that process, that's why it has all of the amino acids. That's why eggs are a good source of protein, because those proteins, those amino acids, the goal is to build it into a baby chicken. But we stop that process and we take them away and put them in our refrigerator, and then we eat them. So you're getting those good proteins because that's the building blocks of what was going to build that baby chicken, but you're also eating the giant energy source that was going to be feeding that process of growing the baby chicken in the process. The balance is that, yes, there's going to be cholesterol in eggs because fatty acids have your highest caloric density. When you look at how many calories you can get from a gram of fat versus a gram of protein versus a gram of carbohydrate, fats give you 2 to 3 times as much energy per gram as any of the other energy sources in your food. So if you're having to be self-contained to build a new organism, a living organism, then the fats are going to give you the most energy for the least amount of stuff that you put in the package. So that's why in an egg, the energy source to help turn those amino acids into a baby chicken is more fat related than carbohydrate related, which is different than beans. When you look at nuts and seeds and things like that, and seeds are a self-contained package because you put it in the ground and it gets a little bit of water and then it kind of feeds itself until it can germinate. Because plant metabolism is different than animal metabolism, the energy source that helps feed the seed while it's waiting to germinate is more carbohydrates. That's why, eggs are a great source of protein because it's all this amino acids and you get all of this wonderful stuff, but you've got the cholesterol with it. So that's why people will eat egg whites instead of a complete egg, because you take that yolk out because that's the most concentrated place for those fatty acids and that cholesterol to be. So that's the balance. So back to HDLs and LDLs. So HDLs get all of these proteins that help it stay focused and to know where to go. LDLs don't get as many proteins, so it gets distracted. It's kind of like a bad driver. So here's your HDL. It gets lots of proteins for guidance. Here is your LDL, not as many proteins, so it's a little less directed. The other thing is that LDLs tend to have more triglycerides crammed into them, and triglycerides is like that. Whoa, that's bad. Triglycerides are essentially a specialized fatty acid that has 3 tails instead of 1. Like an alcohol structure, and it has 3 places to connect, and then the fatty acids connect in 3 places, so it has like 3 tails. So these tails, because the LDLs don't have the guidance of the proteins to be like, we are beelining it to the liver, we're not making any pit stops, don't ask me to pee, we're just going, okay? LDLs, they're a little more distracted, and because they're more distracted, they have a tendency to end up sticking together. So this goes back to like your oils versus your fats in your kitchen. Your oils are liquid at room temperature, so then they just stay liquid when you cook them. The fats, like Crisco, are solid at room temperature, and then it turns liquid when you heat it up. The LDLs have a tendency, yes, coconut oil is a fat. And coconut oil, because everything has fatty acids in it. It's not like you're all one or you're all the other, because the cholesterol, the fatty acids, are actually what help make up the membranes of your cells. And it helps them be more flexible and gushy. So then they can be squeezed and moved around and don't get hurt. So even your healthy foods are going to have some type of fatty acid in there. It just may not be a type of fatty acid that is going to turn into cholesterol and damage your body. The LDLs and the HDLs, it becomes a problem. Like, you need them. You don't need them to be zero. But you need them to be in the right ratio so your body can do the processes that it needs to do. So like build cell membranes. You need cell membranes because you want them to be flexible and mushy and not get hurt and have all of this cellular damage from all the things going on in your body. So you want that cholesterol to do its job there. You just don't want there to be so much that, again, you've got all of these reckless, distracted, like texting and driving drivers in your bloodstream crashing into each other and causing these pileups, because that's essentially what happens. They're not focused on the end goal, so they end up running into each other, then they stick together. So then you've got like a bigger thing going through your bloodstream than like the little separate ones. And then if something happens and they end up running into the wall of your blood vessel, then they'll just get stuck there. And then the thing that happens, it just ends up piling up more and more. And that's how atherosclerosis happens. That's how artery blockage happens. Having these misguided, really sticky cholesterol LDL molecules floating around in your bloodstream, they can build up and stick together and cause all kinds of gunky problems. So that's kind of how that disease process can happen. And with the triglycerides, it's all about how much they can stick together. Where in oils, it stays liquid because the molecules can slide past each other and they don't have to hold on to each other. And so they just kind of keep doing their own thing and it stays really slippery. In fats, they tend to solidify more, so they get stuck together and hold on to each other. That's why it ends up more solid and chunky. So if it's being solid and chunky inside your blood vessels, you can imagine what kind of problems that could cause if there's too much of it. So that's kind of the basics of the types of cholesterol. There's a whole lot more biology and physiology that goes into how they're created and what their jobs are. There's even they've even kind of labeled like a very low density lipoprotein, so that's a VLDL. They can't really measure it directly if you like have your blood drawn and they like give you your cholesterol numbers and things like that. If your lipids are packaged in tight, neatly packed packages, then they're not going to have a major problem. If you have more stuff crammed in a space and they stay more spread out, then that has a tendency to be able to stick to other things and stick to your artery walls and not stay on track as much. So when would one want to take medicine for high cholesterol? At what magic number? There is no magic number, Steve. If there was, America probably would be a lot healthier. Your cholesterol goals are as follows. So your HDL, you were told 200. Okay, 200 is one of the numbers. You want I'm going to start at the bottom because they kind of go in order and it's the easiest way for me to remember it. Your HDLs, those are the ones that you want because they're the ones that are focused. They're the ones that don't get distracted. They do what you tell them to do and they don't cause any extra problems. So for men, your HDL goal is 40. For women, your HDL goal is 50. Your LDL goal is 100. And for some very aggressive treatments which would be for people who are significantly obese, people who may have compounding diseases like they have already had a major cardiac event with cholesterol related to cholesterol, or if they have diabetes and some other comorbidities, which are comorbidities means diseases working together that could potentially kill you. This is the best way I know to put it. The aggressive number for LDLs is 70. Your triglyceride goal is 150. And then total cholesterol number, so that's the HDLs, the LDLs, the triglycerides, and all of the stuff added together, 200. Remember the things that hate water? The LDLs and the HDLs are just the packages to get these water-hating things to travel around your body. The problem is if they're not packaged right, or you have so much that you have to use the bad driving distracted packages, then that's when it leads to problems. So once it gets to the liver, then this thing is taken all apart and the package is opened and the things that hated water are able to be used other ways. So the HDLs and the LDLs are the packages to carry around these lipids that hate water to get them to your liver. The problem is the type of package that they get put in, because there's so much of a certain type of lipid. If there's so much of it and it has to use the less efficient packages, then those are the packages that can cause problems. So you don't want all of these numbers to be zero, because the types of cholesterol and how these fatty acids are used for energy and for storage and for building blocks of your cell membranes and things like that, you still need them for good purposes. You just need them in the right amount. You don't need to get into overkill. Because the other thing is that larger amounts of fat, like when your liver does all of the things that it needs to do with the fatty acids and the cholesterol, if there's a lot of extra, it just kind of packages it all up and turns it into adipose tissue, and that's your fatty tissue, and just starts storing it in places. So that's how you get the fluffy fat storage, because one of the easiest places for that fat to be stored is in that layer underneath your skin but above your muscles. That just happens to be a place that's There's already a natural fat layer there for insulation and protection. And so once fat's in a place, then the body says, oh, hey, you already got fat, have some more. And so then that layer just ends up filling up if you end up having extra fat that the body has to store. And the downside to your fat storage is that they really don't have a limit. The body can cram a whole lot of fat in those layers if you give it to them. So the goal is to limit your fat. 220 on Zocor. So that's not terrible. Okay, back to the magic number thing. So there have been studies done, and this may not apply to you, Steve, but it may at least get you thinking in your head, that middle-aged women with mild to moderate risk for heart disease, when they're put on cholesterol medicine, because that's what they say, if you have this type of number, you have to be on cholesterol medicine. But when all of their risk factors are added up and they're still mild to moderate, even though their cholesterol numbers are at a certain place, they have found that women who get put on cholesterol medicine for those mild to moderate risk go on to have a greater chance of having a cardiac event than just managing mild to moderate risk with lifestyle changes. So someone like my mom, who has slightly high cholesterol, but most everything else when it comes to her risk factors for heart disease are relatively low, they took her off her cholesterol medicine and been like, you know what? Eat right, keep trying to exercise, do your thing, because being on the medications and the side effects from the medications put her at a greater risk for having a cardiac event than just the cholesterol numbers by themselves. So that's where, like I said, there's really not a magic number. Now that's the data for women. The risk factors for men are different, and I haven't seen documentation about any studies that same concept is valid. But it's you can kind of extrapolate and say, if I can manage this disease process by changing my lifestyle, changing my diet, and doing the things and supporting my body in that way, then maybe the medication won't be necessary. And that's true for cholesterol. That's true for type 2 diabetes. That can be true for high blood pressure, because if you're managing and supporting everything from the inside out, then having the medication on top of that may become unnecessary. Again, 220, not a terrible number. Not necessarily a great number that they're going to be excited about, but in the grand scheme of things, I've seen much worse. Now, if your number was much, much worse and we finally got you to 220 by taking Zocor, and that's as good as Zocor's going to do, then you got to stick with that. Every person is different, and that's like my mantra. There's nobody in a textbook. I'm not going to find any patient that I see in a textbook. So you have to get to know yourself on the inside, so then you can have that decent back and forth conversation with the doctor. So at my checkup, see what he says, if I can come off of it. And that's where it's like, if 220 was your number and they say, oh, you need to be on medicine, then I might be a little skeptical and be like, are you sure? Let's see what else we can do. If your number was 450 and you went on medicine and you finally got it down to 220, then you're going to have to stay on that medicine, because there's some process in your body, and not everything about cholesterol is diet related or lifestyle related. There's a lot of things about cholesterol that are genetic. My grandmother, for instance, she is 80 something. She's teeny tiny lady. Father-in-law's number was 700. Oh my gosh. That's where, how have you not already had a heart attack? That's scary. But my grandmother, who is a teeny tiny lady, very healthy, but her genetics make her cholesterol high no matter what she eats. And so that's a situation where it doesn't matter what kind of diet or lifestyle she has, her cholesterol is going to be high because of her genetics, and she has to be on medication to control that. So I don't know what the circumstances are for you, Steve, but if your number was high and the medication brought you down, then going off the medication is probably going to guarantee that your number is going to jump up high again. If your number was kind of mid and they said, oh, you need to be on medicine, then it's kind of like, are you sure? Like, can we maybe try something else first? But a lot of times the lifestyle changes, the diet and exercise part that goes into that, that's like, people think that you're cussing at them when you tell them that, and that's the discipline, they just hate it. It's never gone over 230. So again, it may be a slight genetic thing that just has your natural numbers a little bit higher. But the doctor also takes into account your other risk factors, which has to do with your age, your medical history, your family history. With medicine, it's in the 150s. That's one of those things where they say that's a decent reduction in cholesterol with medication. I kind of border on the side of saying the medicine's worth it, where people will be like, okay, it was at 230 and now I'm at 205. You're going, meh. There's like a whole little risk factor tool that we use to determine your risk factors for heart disease and cardiac events, and cholesterol being one of them, age and gender being a couple other ones, but there's some other things too that go into that would determine to say, yes, the cholesterol is, your risk is high enough that cholesterol medication is going to be needed to keep that risk as low as possible, because you can't help what happened to your parents, and you can't help what you inherit genetically, and you can't, those are the things that you can't do. If medication controls the cholesterol enough that it brings you down into a lower risk category, then I think that's worth it. Because if anyone got to see Emily and Melissa's blab from the other night, where they were talking about food and finances and being able to shop for healthy foods and whole foods and still stay on budget, we got on the subject of bulletproof coffee and putting butter in your coffee, and I was like, I really don't want my coronary patients putting butter in their coffee, because just like the egg thing, even when you make butter from milk straight out of the cow, you don't get fat-free milk from a cow. So there's going to be fat in the milk, there's going to be fat in the butter, and so putting that butter in your coffee just means that you've liquefied that fat for you to drink in through your coffee. So got to use some wisdom in those things. For healthy adults, when that works, great. For people who are already at high risk of having cardiac events due to cholesterol, adding more butter isn't always a wise medical decision. So y'all have a great day. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Pharmacist Answers podcast. The pharmacy is now closed. You can post your questions and comments on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/pharmanswerspod. Or you can email the show at pharmacistanswershere@gmail.com. You can tweet me or message me on Twitter @SinHendrix. You can find the show notes at pharmacistanswershere.wordpress.com. Pharmacist Answers broadcasts live on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 9:02 a.m. Eastern Time on the Periscope app. You can follow me @SinHendrix or view in your web browser at periscope.tv/SinHendrix. See you next time on the Pharmacist Answers podcast.